All right, so let's look at this patient. This is a 43-year-old with a diagnosis of Crohn's disease of the small intestine. She's had several bouts of exacerbated pain, basically, but she's maintained on drug therapy. She's being seen today for that extreme pain. And now the X-ray has identified an obstruction. So once an obstruction is identified, surgery is necessary. So she's taken to surgery where a partial excision of the terminal ileum is performed. There's also, while the surgeon is in the intestines, he also identifies, he or she identifies a section of the jejunum that's inflamed. So this is also resected. An end-to-end anastomosis is completed on all the segments. We want to understand that anastomosis, once those segments of intestines are cut out, you can't just leave the intestine with pieces missing. So that anastomosis is sewing those pieces of intestines back together. Okay, so we want to look now and see what our diagnosis is that we want to code, because we've got to first report for this surgeon. We've got to report the diagnosis. All right. So keep in mind, because I won't come back here, make a note that we've got Crohn's disease of the small intestine, and then we've got an excision of the terminal ileum, and we've got an excision of the jejunum, because that was also resected. And there was an end-to-end anastomosis, meaning the end of the terminal was reconnected to the jejunum. Okay. So let's find a code our diagnosis. All right. All right, so we have Crohn's disease. So I'm going to key in Crohn's disease. All right, this, when I get here, it tells me to see enteritis regional. And I can click on that to go there. And it goes directly to regional. All right, if I scroll, I want to scroll down, and I'm staying under my subterms. Okay, so I want to go with. And I want to see, I've got to find the small intestine, which is right here. And I'm going to open that up. And I have another subterm under the small intestine. Whoops. All right. And if I keep scrolling and I see that we have abscess, fistula, then we have the obstruction. And that's where we're at. So we have Crohn's disease of the small intestine with an obstruction, which is K50.012, but I'm still going to open that up because if I see a plus sign, I want to make sure. All right, so it's not with large intestine, it's not rectal bleeding. The specified complication not elsewhere classified is not applicable because I have my complication specified. It is obstruction. So I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to click on K50.012. Crohn's disease of the small intestine with intestinal obstruction. That is my diagnosis code. Okay. Now I've got to identify what procedure was done. There was 2 procedures done. There was a resection of the ileum and there was a resection of the jejunum. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my index. And whoops, don't get ahead of myself. All right. All right, so if I open this up and I search for resection or intestine, I'm going to search for intestine. Because remember, we talked about the body parts, and sometimes you might find this easier than you would looking for the procedure. Our procedure was defined as just excisions. If we use our medical terminology that we had in our course, we could easily know that an incision of the intestine is called an enterectomy. Excision, ectomy, intestine. All right. So I'm under intestine, and I'm going to keep scrolling down. And I'm going to find small, because I'm in the small intestine. And so I know that I have an enterectomy because I had part of that intestine excised. It wasn't laparoscopically done. So I'm going to open up my 44120 category, because I've got a code range here, and I don't know from looking at this which one it is. When I get here at 44120, an enterectomy, which is the resection, the actual excision of the small intestines, and anastomosis. Now, I want to look in my code book. And like I said, I've been doing a lot of this in my code book view. So I have a single resection and anastomosis. All right, that's my first procedure. That's the excision of the ileum. Do we remember it was the terminal ileum? All right, but I also had an additional resection of the jejunum. So I can see here when I open this up, because you can click using these arrows from code to code, or you can open this up where it looks more just like a book, and you can see that each additional resection and anastomosis, it's telling us to list separately in addition to the code for the primary procedure. So that 44121 is our second procedure code. All right. This is an add-on code. So we know that our 44120 is our primary. You need to know that this is part of the small intestine. We learned that in our course. Do we remember it? Even I don't remember all the little sections of intestines. To be absolutely sure, I'm going to look up a picture in an online dictionary. Okay. All right. So if I go back up here and I'm trying to figure out where I'm at in the intestine, because it says in my procedure note, Crohn's disease of the small intestines, it says a partial incision of the terminal ileum, and then a section of the jejunum is also resected. I want to make sure that both the terminal ileum and the jejunum are part of the small intestine. Or if I don't, I'm going to possibly code it to large intestine. So when I open this picture up, I can clearly see that in my small intestine is my jejunum and my ileum. So I know right here that I am in the small intestine. So I have a resection. And then I have another resection. So I've got to identify both. So this surgeon gets reimbursed for all of his work. 44120 and 44121. Okay. Modifier 51 is not applicable to add-on codes. Okay. So modifier 51 is not going to be assigned in this because it's an add-on code. So with this scenario, I have my K50.012 as my diagnosis, Crohn's disease, small intestine, and I have 44120, and I have 44121. Michael, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Okay. My question is, how do I know that CPT code 44120 and 44121 contains partial assertion of terminal ileum and jejunum? Because I was struggling with that. I got to the code, but I did not see documentation of partial assertion.
I'm sorry, repeat that last. You did not. We're having
partial excision.
partial excision.
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
documentation.
The
Yes.
documentation.
Okay. What we've got is the partial excision of the terminal ileum, and that's probably how you got the 44120. All right. There was a section of the jejunum inflamed. This section was resected, excised, not the entire jejunum. We did not have, if that had been the case, it would have been documented in the procedure differently instead of just the section resected. He or she, the surgeon, would have identified that he removed the jejunum. In this example, we know that we have a section of that intestine. I'm going to pull it back up. We have a section of this intestine inflamed, and only that section is excised. So because I know that I have a resection of a small intestine, single resection. Let's look at our common language description. Now, you do have this in Find a Code for your CPTs, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so we can look in here and we can see that the disease section of intestine is removed. And the residual, which means what's remaining in the small intestine segments, they're sutured back together, like we talked about at the beginning, which the medical term for sutured together is anastomose. Means the same thing. It's just this is what you're going to see the physician use more than you're going to see sutured together. You're going to see this word, anastomosis. So when I read what this is about, this is your learning tool. I can easily see that this code defines a resection of a segment of both my terminal ileum and my jejunum. But I have to have two codes because I had two pieces of intestine resected. So, and I'm in the small intestine category. I didn't go out of there into the large intestine. I'm still in the small intestine category. So I don't have to go out of this code group to identify that the jejunum was also resected. And both of these, they were all anastomosed back together. An interesting procedure to watch is actually this on YouTube. I don't know how many of you, a lot of people do not like watching live videos, but that's how I learn. They also have animated videos for those that don't like live videos of these type procedures. When you watch these procedures, you actually see the resection, you see the anastomosis, it clicks, it helps you to see what they're doing. Good question. Did that help, Michael?
It does.
Thank you. Good. I'm glad. Daniel, did you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to draw your attention to Michael's question because all of us, I mean, I too struggle with it. In fact, I had to go look for resection of the terminal ileum, that is a part of it. So I struggle with it too. But with this response now, I'm now beginning to see.
Okay, good, good. I see the code. Try to keep this up. All right.
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
a code. Yep. This is it. This is it. All right. We didn't do removal. We did, and this is removal of the entire terminal ileum. Partial. We didn't do that. We just did an excision. We did a segmental resection of that terminal ileum. Does that make sense?
It does.
And we did not do a colostomy. That is totally different. If you look here, I don't think it's going to explain, the colostomy is actually where it's attached to like a stoma, a bag on the outside of the patient. That surgeon, because it was small pieces of intestine, was able to go in and suture it back together without the need for a colostomy. Okay. Yeah, I saw this code. I saw it used a couple of times. Yeah. So I understand too. I understand. But this is so much bigger than what we actually had done. Look at those RVUs on this. 36. That's huge. If you start looking at your RVUs, you can tell this is a major procedure right here. Yeah, let's go back and look. Let's just go back and look. Well, I'm getting the same thing here. So I guess they're going to pay good for either. But the thing about here is that they could sew it back together. We didn't have to have a colostomy. Okay. So this did help, correct?
Yes.